That child should not exist, whispered one of the royal elders as the silver bloodstone erupted with light. The ancient relic had stood in the center of Mooncrest Hall for nearly 500 years. It had witnessed coronations, treaties, and generations of alpha rulers. Never once had it reacted the way it did now. The silver glow burst upward like moonlight breaking through storm clouds, washing over the gathered crowd and turning hundreds of stunned faces pale. Conversations died instantly. Every eye fixed on the small boy standing beside the pedestal. Noah Carter blinked in confusion. He was only 5 years old. His sneakers barely touched the edge of the polished marble platform. One small hand still rested against the bloodstone as though he couldn't understand why everyone was staring at him. "Mom," he asked softly, "did I do something wrong?" Across the hall, Evelyn Carter felt her stomach drop. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The sound around her faded into a distant hum. She had spent 5 years running from this exact moment. 5 years building a quiet life where nobody knew her name. 5 years protecting the secret she carried away from the kingdom. And now, with one innocent touch, everything was unraveling. "Noah," she said quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Come here." The boy stepped away from the stone. Instantly, the silver light disappeared. But the damage was done. Murmurs swept through the hall like wind through dry leaves. People exchanged nervous glances. Several elders moved closer to inspect the relic. Others stared openly at Noah. Evelyn recognized the look immediately. Curiosity, suspicion, fear. She pulled Noah gently toward her side. He wrapped his small hand around hers without question. "Why are they looking at me?" he whispered. Evelyn knelt beside him and brushed a strand of blonde hair from his forehead. Hair that looked far too much like someone she had spent years trying to forget. "Because you surprised them," she said. "That's all." But she knew it wasn't all. The bloodstone only reacted to members of the royal bloodline. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew that. The relic was older than the kingdom itself. It recognized alpha blood. It recognized heirs. And Noah had just announced himself to an entire room full of witnesses. Across the chamber, one of the royal historians leaned toward another elder. "Send word to the capital," he whispered. Immediately, Evelyn heard every word. Cold fear crawled through her chest. She looked toward the tall, stained-glass windows overlooking the mountains beyond the city. For 5 years those mountains had protected her, hidden her, given her and Noah a chance at peace. Suddenly, they felt very far away. Noah tugged gently on her sleeve. "Mom." She looked down. His bright blue eyes searched hers. The same impossible shade she remembered seeing beneath a silver crown long ago. "Can we go home now?" Evelyn swallowed hard. Home. The word hurt more than it should have, because deep down she knew home was about to find them. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, in the heart of Blackwood Palace, a king who knew nothing about his son was about to hear a story that would change everything. By sunset, Evelyn had packed everything she could carry. The small cabin that had sheltered them for 5 years suddenly felt unfamiliar, as if it already belonged to someone else. A single suitcase rested beside the door. Noah's favorite blue backpack sat on top of it, stuffed with books, toy cars, and a worn stuffed wolf he refused to leave behind. Outside, the quiet mountain town looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Children rode bicycles down the street. Shop owners lowered signs for the evening. Porch lights flickered on one by one. Yet Evelyn could not shake the feeling that every second brought danger closer. She stood at the kitchen window and stared toward the distant highway cutting through the valley. 5 years ago, she had arrived here with nothing except a broken heart and a newborn son. Nobody had asked questions. Nobody had recognized her. For the first time in her life, she had been allowed to simply exist. Noah's laughter drifted from the living room. The sound tightened something inside her chest. He deserved this life. He deserved school field trips, birthday parties, and afternoons spent chasing fireflies in the backyard. He deserved a childhood untouched by palace walls and royal expectations. Most of all, he deserved the truth. But Evelyn had never found the courage to tell him. A small pair of footsteps approached. Noah appeared beside her carrying his stuffed wolf. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked. Evelyn forced a smile. "Maybe for a little while." His eyes brightened immediately. "Like an adventure?" The innocence in his voice almost made her cry. "Something like that." Noah seemed satisfied with the answer. He climbed onto a chair and looked out the window beside her. Was that stone really important? Evelyn froze. Why would you ask that? Because everybody looked scared. Noah hugged the toy wolf against his chest. I did not mean to make them upset. She knelt beside him and gently squeezed his shoulder. You did nothing wrong. The words came quickly, but doubt lingered beneath them. Across town, the owner of the local diner was already telling customers about the strange event. By tomorrow morning, the story would spread beyond the valley. By the end of the week, it might reach every corner of the territories. The bloodstone had announced Noah's existence more loudly than any royal proclamation ever could. A sudden knock echoed through the cabin. Evelyn's heart jumped. Noah turned toward the door. Who is it? He asked. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she crossed the room and pulled back the curtain. Relief washed over her. It was only Mrs. Harper from next door carrying a pie dish. The elderly woman smiled warmly. I heard Noah was the star of the festival today. Evelyn managed a laugh and opened the door. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but even as she spoke, her attention kept drifting toward the road, toward the darkness beyond the town limits, toward the future she could feel approaching. Hours later, after Noah had fallen asleep, Evelyn sat alone at the kitchen table. Moonlight spilled across the worn wooden surface. In front of her rested a small wooden box she had not opened in years. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a silver ring bearing the crest of Blackwood Palace. Beneath it rested a faded photograph. A younger version of herself smiled beside a tall man with silver eyes. Evelyn stared at the image until her vision blurred. Then she whispered the name she had forbidden herself to speak for 5 years. Alexander. Somewhere far away, in the royal capital, a messenger carrying urgent news was already riding toward the palace gates. The messenger arrived at Blackwood Palace just before dawn. Frost clung to the stone walls of the capital, turning the sprawling fortress silver beneath the first light of morning. Inside the royal council chamber, dozens of officials sat around a long oak table discussing trade routes and winter preparations. Everything stopped when the palace courier burst through the doors carrying a sealed report. Urgent news from Pine Ridge Valley, he announced. At the head of the table, Alexander Blackwood slowly lifted his eyes. Even after 15 years on the throne, his presence could silence a room without a single word. His silver gaze settled on the messenger. Proceed. The courier swallowed hard. The bloodstone reacted during a public gathering yesterday afternoon. Several council members exchanged startled glances. Alexander's expression remained unreadable. To whom? The messenger hesitated. A child, Your Majesty. Silence spread through the chamber. The bloodstone had not reacted to an unknown individual in decades. Alexander leaned back slightly in his chair. Age? Approximately 5 years old. This time, even the senior advisors shifted uneasily. The implications were impossible to ignore. The ancient relic recognized royal blood. There were no exceptions. No mistakes. No false readings. A gray-haired councilman cleared his throat. Perhaps one of the distant family branches? Another shook his head immediately. All known descendants have been documented. The courier continued. Witnesses reported a strong silver illumination, stronger than any reaction recorded in recent history. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He rose from his chair and crossed the room toward the tall windows overlooking the capital. Below, thousands of citizens were beginning their day, unaware that a single event in a distant mountain town had just shaken the foundation of the kingdom. 5 years old. The number lingered in his mind. Something about it felt strange. Familiar. Dangerous. Behind him, voices filled the chamber. Advisors debated possibilities. Historians searched memory. Political strategists whispered concerns. Alexander ignored them all. His instincts rarely failed him. And for reasons he could not explain, they were warning him now. Gather every report, he finally said. The room immediately fell silent again. I want witness statements, photographs, and names. Yes, Your Majesty. And find the child. The order echoed through the chamber. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Evelyn stood beside her truck watching movers load the last few boxes. She had barely slept. Noah sat in the passenger seat eating a blueberry muffin while humming to himself. The sight should have brought comfort. Instead, it made her more afraid. Because she knew they were running out of time. Her phone buzzed inside her jacket pocket. She glanced at the screen and froze. Unknown number. Her heart immediately began racing. After a long moment, she answered, "Hello." There was static for several seconds. Then an elderly voice spoke quietly. "Evelyn." She nearly dropped the phone. "Mrs. Aldridge?" The former palace librarian had not contacted her in years. "You need to leave immediately," the older woman said. "The palace knows about the boy." Evelyn closed her eyes. The warning she had feared for 5 years had finally arrived. Across the parking lot, Noah looked up from his muffin and waved at her through the windshield. Completely unaware that somewhere far away, the most powerful man in the kingdom had just ordered a search that would lead directly to him. They left Pine Ridge Valley before sunrise. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, cutting through forests painted gold by the early autumn light. Evelyn kept both hands tightly wrapped around the steering wheel. Every few minutes, she checked the rearview mirror, searching for vehicles that might have been following them. So far, there were none. Beside her, Noah sat quietly in the passenger seat. For once, he was not humming songs or asking questions about the passing scenery. He sensed something was wrong. Children always did. After nearly an hour of silence, he finally spoke. "Mom." Evelyn glanced toward him. "Yes." "Are we running away?" The question hit harder than she expected. For a moment, she could not answer. Noah stared out the window. "Last time we moved, you looked like this too." Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her chest. He remembered more than she realized. 2 years earlier, they had relocated from another small town after a local teacher became suspicious of Noah's unusual abilities. Nothing dramatic had happened, but Evelyn had learned long ago that questions were dangerous. Questions led to records. Records led to investigations. Investigations led to the palace. "We are just taking a trip," she said gently. Noah nodded, though neither of them seemed convinced. Hundreds of miles away, inside Blackwood Palace, Alexander stood alone in the royal archives. Dust drifted through beams of sunlight filtering between towering shelves. Generations of history surrounded him. Birth records, family trees, ancient journals. Every known branch of the royal bloodline had been documented here. Yet after 6 hours of searching, one fact remained unchanged. There was no recorded child matching the description from Pine Ridge Valley. "Impossible," murmured the chief archivist. Alexander remained silent. His attention was fixed on a photograph lying on a nearby desk. It had arrived with the latest witness reports. The image showed a crowd gathered around the bloodstone. Most faces were blurred by movement, but one figure stood out clearly. A woman with long blonde hair pulling a young boy protectively toward her side. The moment Alexander saw her, something inside him stopped. His fingers tightened around the edge of the photograph. 5 years vanished in an instant. He knew that face. He knew the curve of her smile, the determination in her eyes, the way she always placed herself between danger and the people she loved. "Evelyn," he whispered. The archivist looked up. "Your Majesty?" Alexander barely heard him. He was staring at the child now. Bright blue eyes, blonde hair, familiar features. Features that suddenly seemed impossible to ignore. A cold realization began forming in the back of his mind. 5 years ago, Evelyn had disappeared without explanation. No goodbye, no confrontation, only a brief letter saying she needed to leave. He had searched for months before eventually accepting that she never wanted to return. At least that was what he had told himself. Now doubt was creeping into every memory. Back on the highway, dark clouds gathered over distant mountains. Noah had fallen asleep against the passenger window. Evelyn glanced at him and softened. Even asleep, he looked so much like his father that it almost hurt. Her phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. Her pulse quickened. She ignored the call. Seconds later, a text message appeared on the screen mounted beside the dashboard. Only 6 words. "He knows who you are now." Evelyn felt the color drain from her face. For 5 years, she had feared this moment. Now it had finally arrived. And somewhere behind them, the distance between past and present was rapidly disappearing. Rain began falling shortly after sunset. Evelyn pulled into a small roadside motel tucked between towering pine trees and a quiet two-lane highway. The neon vacancy sign flickered softly through the storm. It was not much, but it would keep them hidden for the night. At least she hoped so. Noah pressed his face against the window. "Can we stay here?" he asked. "Just until morning," Evelyn replied. He smiled and grabbed his backpack. Within minutes, they were settled into a modest room with faded wallpaper and a view of the parking lot. Noah immediately claimed the bed closest to the window. For the first time all day, he looked relaxed. Evelyn wished she could feel the same. While Noah watched cartoons, she sat at the small table reviewing maps on her phone. Every route seemed risky. Every destination felt temporary. A soft knock suddenly echoed against the door. Her entire body stiffened. Noah looked up. "Are you expecting someone?" Evelyn carefully approached the door and checked through the peephole. Relief washed over her. It was only the motel owner carrying extra blankets. After thanking him, she closed the door and tried to calm her nerves. Hours later, after Noah had fallen asleep, Evelyn stepped outside beneath the covered walkway. Rain tapped steadily against the roof. She needed air, needed a moment to think. 5 years of running had taught her many things, but it had never taught her how to stop being afraid. She pulled out her phone and stared at the old photograph again. Alexander's silver eyes seemed almost alive beneath the screen's glow. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why after all this time?" She never expected an answer. Yet hundreds of miles away, Alexander was asking himself the exact same question. Inside a royal helicopter crossing the Northern Territories, he studied every report collected during the past 24 hours. Photographs, witness statements, security footage. The deeper he looked, the less he could ignore the similarities. The child smiled like him, moved like him, even stood with the same unconscious confidence. None of that proved anything. Yet his instincts refused to stay silent. Suddenly his chief advisor leaned forward from the opposite seat. "Your Majesty, there is another report." Alexander accepted the tablet. The image displayed a grainy photograph captured outside a local bakery months earlier. Evelyn stood beside the boy holding a shopping bag. The child was laughing about something. Alexander stared at the image for several seconds. Then he noticed it. Around the boy's neck hung a small silver pendant. A pendant Alexander recognized instantly. His breath caught. 5 years ago, he had given that pendant to Evelyn. There had only ever been one. The helicopter cabin fell silent. "Change course," Alexander ordered quietly. "Sir, we are going to Pine Ridge Valley." Meanwhile, back at the motel, Noah suddenly woke from sleep. His blue eyes opened wide as though he had heard something. He climbed out of bed and walked to the window. Beyond the rain and darkness, distant headlights moved along the highway. Noah placed a hand against the glass. A strange feeling settled over him. Familiar, warm, almost like remembering someone he had never met. "Mom," he called softly. Evelyn stepped back inside. "What is it?" Noah continued staring into the night. "I think someone is looking for us." The words sent a chill through Evelyn's chest because deep down she knew he was right. Morning arrived beneath a gray sky. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the scent of wet pine and distant mountains. Evelyn loaded the last of their belongings into the truck while Noah sat on the curb, hugging his stuffed wolf. He looked unusually quiet. Every few moments he glanced toward the highway as though expecting someone to appear. "Ready?" Evelyn asked. Noah nodded. They climbed into the truck and pulled back onto the road. For nearly 2 hours they drove, without speaking much. The farther they traveled, the more Evelyn hoped they had managed to stay ahead of whatever was coming. Then Noah suddenly sat upright. "Mom." Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What is it?" He pointed toward a large roadside diner ahead. "Can we stop? I am hungry." Evelyn checked the clock. They had been driving since dawn. A short break would not hurt. At least that was what she told herself. 10 minutes later, they sat inside a cozy booth near the window. The smell of pancakes and fresh coffee filled the room. Noah was halfway through a stack of blueberry pancakes when a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. An elderly man had dropped several grocery bags. Apples rolled across the floor. Before anyone else reacted, Noah jumped from his seat. "I got them," he called. He hurried across the diner gathering the scattered fruit. Customers smiled as they watched him help. The old man laughed warmly. "Thank you, young man." Noah grinned and handed him the last apple. The moment their hands touched, something strange happened. The elderly man's expression changed. His eyes widened slightly. "Your eyes," he whispered. Noah blinked. "What about them?" The man stared for a moment longer before shaking his head. "Nothing. You just remind me of someone." Back at the booth, Evelyn felt uneasy. She could not explain why. Then she noticed another customer sitting near the counter. A woman in a business suit had been watching Noah almost the entire time. The woman quickly looked away when their eyes met. A chill moved down Evelyn's spine. Hundreds of miles away, Alexander's helicopter descended toward Pine Ridge Valley. Investigators had spent the night collecting additional information. New photographs, New sightings. New leads. One report in particular now rested in Alexander's hands. A gas station security image captured less than 12 hours earlier. The quality was poor, but it was enough. Evelyn stood beside a truck while Noah climbed into the passenger seat. Alexander stared at the image for several long seconds. There was no denying it anymore. The resemblance was becoming impossible to ignore. His chief advisor studied the same photograph. "Sir, perhaps we should proceed carefully." Alexander did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the child. "Find out where they are headed. And if they keep moving?" Alexander looked out the helicopter window toward the endless mountains below. A strange mixture of hope and regret settled heavily in his chest. "Then we keep looking." Back at the diner, Noah returned to the booth carrying a paper napkin covered in drawings. "Look what I made." Evelyn forced a smile. He had sketched 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright sun. One was labeled Mom. One was labeled Noah. The third figure made her heart stop. Written carefully above it was a single word. "Dad." Noah looked up at her. "Do you think I will ever meet him?" Evelyn stared at the drawing as fear and sadness collided inside her. Before she could answer, a black SUV slowly pulled into the parking lot outside. The moment Evelyn saw the black SUV, her pulse jumped. She immediately stood from the booth. Noah looked up in confusion as she gathered their belongings. "Mom," he asked, "we need to go." Something in her voice made him obey without argument. Together, they moved quickly toward the side exit of the diner. Outside, the afternoon air felt heavy. Evelyn tightened her grip on Noah's hand as they crossed the parking lot. The black SUV had stopped near the entrance, but nobody had stepped out yet. She did not wait to find out who was inside. They reached the truck. Evelyn opened the passenger door and helped Noah climb in. Just as she rounded the hood, a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Evelyn." Every muscle in her body froze. Slowly, she turned around. Standing 20 feet away was not a palace guard, not an investigator, not a royal advisor. It was Mrs. Aldrich. The elderly librarian looked exhausted after what must have been a long journey. Relief washed through Evelyn so quickly that her knees nearly gave out. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Mrs. Aldrich approached carefully, trying to help. She glanced toward Noah, who watched from inside the truck. "You do not have much time." Evelyn already knew that. "How close is he?" The older woman's expression answered before her words did. "Closer than you think." A knot formed in Evelyn's stomach. 5 years. She had managed to stay hidden for 5 years. Yet somehow it no longer felt like enough. Mrs. Aldrich reached into her purse and removed a worn envelope. The edges were faded with age. "You need to see this." Evelyn accepted it cautiously. The moment she recognized her own handwriting, her breath caught. "No," she whispered. "That is impossible." She remembered the letter immediately. It was the one she had written before leaving the palace. The one she had entrusted to a royal courier. The one Alexander had supposedly ignored. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. The words stared back at her exactly as she remembered writing them. "Alexander, if you are reading this, there is something you deserve to know." Tears blurred her vision. "He never received it," Mrs. Aldrich said quietly. Evelyn looked up. "What?" The older woman nodded sadly. "Someone intercepted it before it reached him." The world seemed to tilt beneath Evelyn's feet. For years she had believed Alexander chose silence, chose duty, chose a future that did not include her. Every painful memory had been built on that belief. "Who?" she whispered. Mrs. Aldrich shook her head. "I do not know, but I know this letter remained hidden until 3 days ago." Evelyn stared down at the pages. Suddenly, everything felt different. Every assumption, every wound, every reason she had spent years running. From inside the truck, Noah pushed open the passenger door. "Mom." She quickly wiped her eyes. "I am okay." But before she could say anything else, the distant sound of helicopter blades drifted across the sky. Mrs. Aldrich looked upward first. Her face went pale. Evelyn followed her gaze. A dark aircraft appeared beyond the tree line, moving steadily toward town. The elderly woman exhaled slowly. "Evelyn," she said, "I think he found you." At that exact moment, hundreds of feet above the highway, Alexander Blackwood stared through the helicopter window and saw a familiar truck parked beside a small roadside diner. For the first time in 5 years, hope surged through his chest. For a long moment, nobody moved. The helicopter settled onto an open field beyond the diner while the sound of its blades slowly faded into silence. Evelyn stood beside her truck, clutching the old letter against her chest. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear anything else. Noah looked between the adults in confusion. "Mom," he asked softly. She could not answer. Across the field, the helicopter door opened. A tall figure stepped onto the grass. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking him. 5 years had changed many things, but not the commanding presence that seemed to follow Alexander Blackwood wherever he went. The wind stirred his dark coat as he walked forward. Every step felt unreal. Evelyn had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. Anger, accusations, regret. None of those imagined conversations prepared her for the reality of seeing him again. Noah instinctively moved closer to her side. Alexander stopped several yards away. His silver eyes found Evelyn immediately. For a second, neither of them spoke. The years between them felt impossibly heavy. Then Alexander noticed the letter in her hands. Understanding flashed across his face. "You know now," he said quietly. Evelyn swallowed hard. "I know you never received it." The words carried more emotion than she intended. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. The regret in his expression was impossible to miss. "If I had known." He stopped. The sentence remained unfinished, because both of them understood what it meant. If he had known, everything might have been different. Noah looked from one face to the other. "Mom, who is he?" The question shattered the fragile silence. Alexander's attention shifted to the boy. For the first time, they truly looked at each other without distance or photographs standing between them. The resemblance was undeniable now. The same eyes, the same posture, the same quiet determination. Something softened in Alexander's expression. Something Evelyn had never seen anyone else bring out of him. Noah studied him curiously. "Have we met before?" Alexander's voice was gentler than anyone standing nearby had ever heard. "No." Noah tilted his head. "Then why do you look familiar?" A faint smile appeared despite the emotion in Alexander's eyes. Before anyone could respond, several black vehicles arrived from the highway. Royal officials stepped out quickly, carrying folders and documents. One of them approached Alexander. "Your Majesty, we have confirmed the bloodstone records." He handed over a report. "There is no doubt." Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Alexander opened the file. The official continued speaking. "The bloodline markers match completely." The surrounding advisors exchanged astonished looks. Years of uncertainty disappeared in a single moment. Alexander slowly lowered the report. Then he looked directly at Noah. Emotion flickered across his face before he finally spoke. "You asked your mother if you would ever meet your father." Noah's eyes widened. Evelyn froze. Alexander took a slow breath. "The answer is yes." Silence swept across the field. Even the officials seemed unable to look away. Noah stared at him in shock. Then his gaze shifted toward Evelyn. She felt tears gathering as she gave the smallest nod. The little boy looked back at Alexander. Neither spoke. Yet somehow everything had already changed. Because after 5 years of secrets, the truth was finally standing in the open. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but to Evelyn it felt like an entire lifetime. Noah stood between them, his small hands gripping the straps of his backpack as he tried to understand a truth that had arrived all at once. His blue eyes moved from Alexander to Evelyn and back again. "You are my dad?" he finally asked. Alexander's throat tightened. Of all the conversations he had imagined having one day, none had prepared him for that simple question. "Yes," he answered honestly. Noah blinked several times. Then he asked the question that mattered most. "Did you know about me?" The field became perfectly still. Evelyn closed her eyes. Alexander did not look away. "No," he said quietly. "I did not." Noah studied his face carefully, as though searching for something. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him. The little boy nodded slowly. Then, to everyone's surprise, he walked forward. Alexander instinctively lowered himself to one knee so they were at eye level. Noah looked at him for another long moment. "Mom cried sometimes when she thought I was asleep." Evelyn felt her heart squeeze. Noah continued, "I always wondered why." Alexander's expression filled with regret. "I am sorry." The words were not dramatic. They were not royal. They were simply honest. For the first time in years, Evelyn believed them. A gentle breeze moved across the field. The tension that had followed her for 5 years seemed to loosen its grip little by little. Nearby, royal officials remained respectfully silent. Even they understood this moment belonged to a family, not a kingdom. Noah looked toward his mother. Are we still leaving? Evelyn opened her mouth, but no answer came. The truth was she no longer knew. Everything she had planned had been built on a misunderstanding. The letter, the silence, the years apart. None of it had happened the way she believed. Alexander slowly rose to his feet. His gaze remained fixed on Evelyn. I cannot change the past. His voice carried across the field. I cannot give back the years we lost. Emotion threatened to break through his carefully controlled expression. But I can tell you the truth. He took a step closer. I searched for you. Evelyn felt tears gathering again. For months after you disappeared. Another step. And if I had known about Noah, nothing would have stopped me from finding you. The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. Noah looked between them and smiled slightly. Children often recognized simple truths faster than adults. Then maybe everybody made mistakes, he said. The statement was so innocent that it drew a quiet laugh from Mrs. Aldrich. Even Alexander smiled. Evelyn wiped away a tear. For the first time in years, the future did not feel frightening. It felt uncertain, yes, but also hopeful. Alexander extended a hand toward Noah. Would you like to see the palace someday? Noah's eyes widened immediately. Really? Really? The little boy grinned from ear to ear. Then he reached for his mother's hand and, after a brief hesitation, reached for Alexander's as well. Standing beneath the open sky, the three of them formed a circle that should have existed years ago. Around them, the clouds slowly parted. Sunlight spilled across the field, warm and golden. No declarations were needed. No grand ceremony. No royal announcement. Because sometimes the strongest promise was not spoken at all. It was simply the choice to stop running, to start healing, and to walk forward together into a future neither fear nor fate could take away.